Augustina Bazterrica wrote one of my favorite novels, and that is Tender as the Flesh. I reviewed it here on this channel, so I'll put the link up there if you want to check it out. So you can imagine my excitement when I found out that she's coming out with a new novel titled The Unworthy, with a very cool yet very familiar premise. And now I've read it, so here are my thoughts. But before we get into that, what is the hook? What is The Unworthy about? An unnamed woman lives in a religious cult's convent, while the outside world crumbles from environmental disaster. When a stranger infiltrates their walls, she begins questioning everything about the sacred sisterhood and the dark secrets behind their pursuit of enlightenment. I should briefly talk about the setting because it is one of the best things about this novel. It's gritty, it's grimy, it's grimdark, you might say, not the fantasy way. Right off the bat, with the very first page of this book, Bazterrica is immersing us in this dark world. And I'm going to read the very first page when I talk about the writing section, so stay tuned for that and you'll see what I'm talking about. But in short, if you've ever played the game called Blasphemous, it's a side scroller. It's very steeped in dark Catholic lore, you might say. I immediately got that feeling from playing the game. But if you haven't played the game, it's cold, dark walls, cockroaches and crickets and blood and maiming and torture. You know, all the good stuff you expect from a post-apocalyptic novel. But if you like the dark, you like the gritty, you like the depraved, you are going to love the setting in The Unworthy. Okay, let's talk about the obvious comparison. That is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Same setup, same narrative device even, but I guess if you haven't read The Handmaid's Tale, that might be a bit of a spoiler. I apologize. So our unnamed narrator is writing a journal. That is the book we are reading. That is all we are reading. There is one chapter in this entire thing with scene breaks and other clever things I'm going to talk about in the writing section. And while I love the characterization in The Handmaid's Tale, I felt a certain closeness and empathy toward the narrator, and it even hit me harder once I got to the end of the novel. I never felt that empathy with this character. Now, the writing itself is deep, right? It's first-person POV. She's writing about her experiences while she's in this convent and all of the terrible things she's witnessing, what she's aspiring to be, which is the enlightened, of course, and all of the mundane activities that take place within this convent. It feels like Bazterrica is going through all of the motions. She's hitting all of the things one should to create empathy in a character, but I just never felt any connection to the narrator here. And maybe that's the point, because she has been stripped of her humanity. She is forced, but not forced, to live in this convent, because the outside world is a terrible, terrible place, which we learn about as well. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword where she could go into the wilds, but survival there might be even more difficult than the horrors she is faced with within the walls. So I was hoping that despite her demeanor that she shows us she must display to the outside world, I was hoping that we were going to get a more intimate view, a part of her that no one else really sees. But it just didn't happen for me. There are side characters, but again, I never got any kind of depth from them either. I didn't feel like they complimented who she was or challenged who she was or made her learn about herself in such a way that journaling can exhibit. It can make you learn things about yourself, or at least allow the reader of this document to read between the lines and see what the narrator didn't see. All right, let's talk about the plot next. In short, it is trying to do a lot of things with very, very few pages. So this novel is under 200 pages long, and I'll say it's kind of a three-pronged novel, in that the first half of the book, I believe, is just the mundane activities, setting the stage, everything she's going through at this convent. And then right at the midpoint, we get into her backstory, how the world became what it is today, and her struggles along the way to get to this convent. And there's a little bit of a love story at the end as well. But pacing, well, it felt incredibly slow. And that is to be expected, I think, right? She's going about these very boring tasks day in and day out in a convent. And so you can imagine how that would read and how that would be realistically. But I was hoping that Bazterrica would spin this web of atmosphere that would keep me hooked. But I never really found myself drawn to read this book. And it's a very short book, like I said. I was expecting to just blaze right through this thing. And another indicator as to why I wasn't invested was the flashback. So like I said, when we get to about the halfway point, we start learning about her childhood, about her mother, about how the world became the way it is. And I was excited. This was a change of pace for me. And the biggest reason I know why the pacing was so terrible in this novel is because I really don't care about flashbacks. I always like the story to move forward. So sure, you can have a narrator telling a story from when they were a child all the way till they were an adult, but that's not how this story is written. It starts in the present, lasting till nearly half the book, and then we get a glimpse of the past. And speaking of the past, I have a bit of a pet peeve when it comes to apocalyptic narratives, and that is why the world became what it is. What destroyed the world? One of those things being, wait for it, climate change.
How dare you!
The most boring post-apocalyptic plot device in existence, the most played out one, and it is present in this novel, as well as, well, here's a new one for you, AI. So there is a brief mention of AI, how it led to the collapse of civilization. Again, she never goes into a lot of specifics in any of these regards, but still, very tired, very lazy to a degree. I far more prefer the unexplained, something like Cormac McCarthy's The Road, because the story should really never be about what destroyed the world. It should be about how we as a species move forward. At least that's what I look for in post-apocalyptic fiction. I really don't care what happened. I care about what is going to happen. And the love story, it feels like it's kind of the impetus of the entire story, right? The catalyst, you might say, right when you hit the inciting incident for you story nerds out there. But it happens very late in the book and it feels very undeveloped. So again, I just wasn't invested in the story. So a very mixed bag. I really wished Bazterrica would have taken one of these ideas and stuck with it, really laser focused on it. And I think that would have helped immensely, not only in pacing, but in characterization as well. So let's talk about the writing itself, or as I like to call it, the cinematography of the novel. Like I said, I'm going to read the opening couple of sentences of this novel and you will see just how amazing it is. I was very, very excited when I first started this novel. So here we go. Someone is screaming in the dark. I hope it's Lourdes. I put cockroaches in her pillow and sewed up the slip so they struggle to get out, so they crawl under her head or over her face and into her ears, I hope, nesting there, the nymphs damaging her brain. I left small gaps between the stitches so the cockroaches would escape slowly, so it would take effort, like when I trap them, imprison them in my hands. Some of them bite. They have flexible skeletons. They can flatten themselves and fit through tiny spaces, live without heads for days, survive underwater for a long time. They're fascinating. I like to experiment with them, cut off their antennae, their legs, stick needles in them. I squash them with a glass so I can linger over their primitive, brutal frames. I boil them, I burn them, I kill them. Hell of a start, right? I was hooked, I loved it, and there is so many great passages like that in this novel. It's just, it never developed into anything concrete for me anyways, and nothing I could actually latch on to, see the nuance, see the depth of the characterization. There's some really cool things that Bazterrica does with the formatting here, and it makes a lot of sense because it is a journal, but what those things are, and I'll put some screenshots up, is that she'll do strike-throughs. Certain words, certain phrases, because she's writing this journal with blood, with ink, with whatever she can find. And it really adds to the authenticity of this book, because you can picture her there scrawling these lines in secret, striking through the ones she wants to rethink, but also stopping short. So there's plenty of times in this book where she doesn't finish her sentences. She's writing and then somebody walks into the room, or she's writing and she hears a sound. So it really adds to the immersive experience of this book. The writing itself, fantastic, atmospheric, doing clever things with formatting. I just wish everything else in this novel was just as good, which is why I'm going to have to give The Unworthy by Augustina Bazterrica a 6.5 out of 10. A grim homage to The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, but never reaches the heights of its characterization, with a plot that is trying to do too much with too few pages, but with writing that is atmospheric and immersive, and doing some clever things with formatting. But in the end, it wasn't enough to keep this book together for me. Yes, I'm disappointed if you couldn't tell. It's not a terrible book, and I think some people out there are probably going to enjoy it more than I did, but it pales in comparison to Tender is the Flesh. Tender is the Flesh, for me, had leaps and bounds better characterization. It had a coherent plot, it had thematic depth and metaphor, and this novel just doesn't have it, which is a shame because I love the concept, I love that it's a short book, I love the narrative device. It just feels like a jumble of things that never really evolved into what they should have been. But let me know, did you read The Unworthy by Augustina Bazterrica? How do you feel about it? I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below, or you can come hang out on my Discord server and tell me to my face. And if you'd like to read my own creative work, check out the links down in the description. And thanks for watching, thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.